next one.
Is you can do whatever you want so long as you don't harm anyone else. You should include the incest as well. They get so angry, and you know, one of them said it's not natural. I said, wait, hold on 1 second. You're saying it's not natural for the brother and the sister to be together. I agree with you. But we also say it's not natural for the man and the man to be together. Isn't that right? And this is what happens when you don't have a book telling you what is right and what is wrong. They make their own things up and they end up destroying their lives. If the idea is you can do whatever you want, so long as you don't harm anyone else, you should include the incest.
All right. So here is the problem of incest. I think we have dealt with this problem in one of our earlier streams, probably one of the very early streams, maybe. Uh, and then we did point out that there are issues with it, right? Why incest is not favored among humans.
I don't think we've ever covered incest.
Okay, all right. Maybe my memory is not serving me well. But so, yeah.
I'll say, I mean, I'll just address, because I think that is the only point that is worth addressing. The response that he's trying to respond to, I think, that it's natural or not, that is not a fair argument to make. So that's why I wouldn't discuss that. What I'd respond to is the fact is how he's trying to deal with the no harm principle. And he's saying that if there is no harm, that is the primary principle that we are basing our morality or our behaviors upon, then why shouldn't we allow incest? Well, the basic point being, we do know that incest is harmful, so we would not allow incest for that very reason. Second point, even if you say, because Muslims often say, well, what if the siblings use contraceptives and then therefore they remove that risk? Now, what I would say, and what generally the view is, that there is still the risk of them, the overall risk by such behavior would still increase, because if you allow this thing, the use of contraceptives, allow them to commit incest while using contraceptives, you are still giving them, allowing them this certain activity, which if encouraged could lead to further risks, right? Let's say if sometimes siblings doesn't use contraceptives because of for whatever reasons. Now, what the primary question that I'll ask Mohammed Hijab is, let's say Muslims ask what they are trying to, their question is, and let me, steelman their argument. So what they're saying is, let's remove every negative aspect from incest. That is, incest, whatever harm it can do, let's say somehow we have now built the technology to remove everything negative that was there, which was attached with incest. Now, would you allow incest? Well, I'd say, my point would be, yes, if there is no harm from an action, then there should be no problem in doing that. My counter question to hijab and Muslims would be, why does God, so you say that according to you, it would still be wrong because your book says it is wrong, which means that God says it is wrong. My question is this: if God says something is wrong, does he prescribe something as good or evil, or good or bad, based on some rationale or wisdom, or is it just a random order? If it is based on a rationale, then what rationale is it? Isn't it to avoid a certain harm or to achieve a specific good goal? If it isn't that, then the only other option remains is that it is a random order. It is just a random, arbitrary. It is an arbitrary order from God. So according to you, even if you remove every negative aspect from incest, you would still say that it is wrong, because God said so.
God says so.
Then we'd say that then you're agreeing that God's order itself was arbitrary, entirely arbitrary, and then your entire moral framework, I don't know which argument is arbitrary, which rule is arbitrary or not, and your whole moral framework is just based on arbitrary rules and regulations. It's nothing else. So your argument becomes I mean, it's nothing then. You're just trying to
Yeah,
prove nothing.
yeah, yeah.
Just
And,
arbitrary rules, right?
Cali, Cali, at this point, Muslim would respond, and wrongly so, that no, God's nature is good, and His goodness includes that incest is wrong, basically, right? And you see that the problem is, again, you're shifting
Again,
the problem
so you're
one
coming
step
back to the
further,
same point then.
basically.
It means there is
Yeah,
something good in not committing incest, which means
right,
you're inadvertently or unconsciously you're saying the same thing. There is a no harm principle underlying this, your moral framework as well. At least this is what the Muslim is trying to pose, but they're not conscious. They're not saying that consciously or not actually spelling it out that way. But indeed, that is what they're trying to say, right? So I
right,
would say
right,
that it's a meaningless argument.
right. And
They don't see the fallaciousness of their argument.
Martin, you wanted to say something? Should I add one point before I give the mic to you? Just the power dynamics. Let's suppose we get to the harm principle thing here, and then within that, it might be tagged wrong based on the power dynamics within the family. Basically, you have strong power dynamics within the family members. Dads have certain rights over moms have certain rights over dad, and they both have certain rights over children. In case that the incest is permitted between two individuals in a family, where there is a situation where there might be power dynamic situations arising, it might be harmful for both, especially for the one who's who's being dominated by the other one. And in a homosexual relationship, this power dynamic usually doesn't take place. It might. I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't. Probably between two homosexuals, it might happen that one is probably older and commands that, uh, at least demands, not commands, but it demands that power dynamic, which is more likely to happen in a familial relationships, basically. And the other argument against that is also, so let's say this is true, that what he's saying, that unless until a book says that you don't commit incest, our book says that. So basically, if you are a Muslim, do you when you are a Muslim, do you feel that attraction, and then when you read a book that it says no, you don't have to get attracted to your family members, does that happen? So, or is it your innate nature that you don't get attracted to your family members, basically? So if that's true for innateness of this attraction, that it doesn't happen, so then you don't need a book to tell you that you don't have to do this, right? Anyway, Martin, mic is yours.
yeah. So, in regards to incest and so on, the idea that the parallel with homosexuality is that if you predicate on the grounds that there is no harm with homosexuality, and therefore that it should be legally and morally acceptable behavior, precisely because two people getting together doesn't cause any harm. Now you can apply the same logic to incest and rationalize that, and also make the argument that there's nothing wrong with incest either, right? So one of the main problems here that Mohammed Hijab is trying to express is something that is maybe like morally counterintuitive as a result. That we realize there's something wrong with incest, but if you apply the harm principle to its logical conclusion, then it will justify incest, and there'll be nothing morally objectionable about incest. However, because we have intuitions that suggest that incest is wrong, and we can't validate that intuition using the resources on an atheistic, naturalistic universe, where we try and use the equations of harm, for example, or maybe something else, maybe like a deontological principle, or maybe a utilitarian analysis, and none of those successfully none of those successfully show that incest in all circumstances is wrong, then there's something wrong with that moral theory, because it leads to a counterintuitive result. It leads to us having to accept incest, and only his divine command theory can rescue that, because it provides justification for that intuition, right? But as Kylie said, it is not clear how it provides justification for that intuition. that incest is wrong? Is it wrong because just God simply said so? Then it's just arbitrary. Is it wrong because of something else? Then what is that something else? And whatever that something else is, it should be also accessible. Well, not accessible, but it's independent. It stands independent to God, right? It's either because it's harmful or it's something else. That's another theory. God then just becomes a messenger to try and give us some reasons not reasons, but becomes a messenger to give us guidance and following that theory
to already established, moral principles.
whatever it is, whatever that is. If it's not the harm principle, then it's something else. Even hijab doesn't know what that is, right? He just knows it's wrong and God said so. Well, that's not a sufficiently clear enough moral theory. The problems that arise on his issue, on his little divine command theory, is that first of all, he's got the epistemological problem. He doesn't know whether God actually has a good reason. God only claims that he has a good reason. Two, if indeed God has a reason, and it's a good reason, and it's actually a good, morally good reason, then without knowing exactly what that is, Mohammed Hijab isn't being a good person per se. He's just blindly obeying certain dictates that might correspond to an actual morally good thing. In other words, imagine if I have a computer and a computer figures out all the good actions, moral good actions. This is like a artificial intelligence, and this artificial intelligence is designed to create answers that we can't know are correct, but we believe that the system is correct about those answers. So it could solve like mathematical problems that our human minds can't on its own solve. Something like that might be what Mohammed Hijab is presenting, So God is this kind of supercomputer that can solve certain mathematical questions by itself, or something like that, or moral questions by itself. The issue there is, under certain moral theories, you need to know why what you're doing is morally wrong, and then therefore you have to orient yourself towards that moral end in that way. So the reason that charity is good or not raping somebody is bad is that we have the reasons why charity is good is because it increases flourishing of human beings, or why raping people is bad is because it harms other people. And then when you recognize that and then motivate yourself like that by identifying the reason why I'm not doing something, which is raping people, or identifying the reason why I am doing something, which is helping people through charity, and then you perform an action or an inaction not by refraining from raping somebody, or an action which is giving charity, then you're properly morally motivated because you recognize why you're doing it. And under Hijab's theory, he has no reason why he's doing it, right? He's not properly morally motivated. Yeah. So there's that other issue as well. So he's just blindly following the dictates of a being without realizing why something is wrong. Yeah. So he kind of, on his theory, the wrongness of our action is devoid of any deep meaning. It's this kind of opaque category, and he just follows it. Anyway, but if there are things that are wrong with incest, I'm sure Mohammed Hijab would just say that it's something like this. If I pushed his foot to the fire, if I held his foot to the fire, I should say, it'll be something like this. Incest is wrong not because it causes any sort of harm. Incest is wrong not because a brother and sister, when they get together, it leads to a genetic disorder, a disability in a child and an offspring. Incest is not wrong because of any of those reasons. The reason incest is wrong is because it is wrong for a brother and sister to be together. It's wrong for a grandmother and a daughter, a great granddaughter, to be together sexually. It's wrong for a father to have sex with a daughter sexually. The act in itself is inherently wrong, independent to any sort of effect, right? So even if there's no consequence of the action, it's still wrong. Yeah, by kissing your mother on the lips in a sexual romantic manner, that is inherently wrong. It doesn't need to lead to a negative outcome. Like a bomb doesn't go off in Jamaica. The sky doesn't fall apart. A sexually transmitted disease doesn't occur. It's not because of those reasons. intrinsically wrong. But wait a minute. If that's the case, then the atheist also has that opportunity to say the same thing, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's inherently wrong. Now, what does Mohammed Hijab say to explain, justify why it's inherently wrong? He doesn't know. So the atheist is in the same position as well. We don't know it either. There you go. So the atheist,
See,
can you see that?
Madan, he has one trump card here. In God we trust.
Yeah, but like I said, he doesn't really know what to trust there. I mean, it's like me saying in atheism on no God, I just trust, an instinct, right?
Right.
Something
No, I
like that.
just wanted to
Yeah.
mock that. Sorry, I didn't want to mock anybody, but just wanted it's written on the I think American money, right? Dollar
Yeah,
bills,
yeah,
basically,
yeah,
right? In
yeah.
God we trust. Okay, sorry, just
Because ultimately
go
he's
ahead.
blindly trusting God on faith because he doesn't have that reason, right? And but if the atheist really badly wanted to, just could not find any reason to promote, justify, rationalize incest, and wanted to prohibit it and think it's morally wrong, he also has that accessible to him. It's just deontologically wrong. It's like a deontological wrong. Thou shalt not murder in all circumstances. It's absolutely wrong. It's inherently wrong for a brother and a sister to have sexual relations, right? So now here's the other issue that might generate. The person who is promulgating the harm principle might not be able to consistently hold that outlook. If somebody is saying that all action, all behaviors, and so on, whether it's right or wrong, has to be analyzed through harm, then that person doesn't have that sort of avenue. But not everybody thinks that. Not every atheist or naturalist necessarily has to hold that sort of belief, right? That harm is the only way. Harm could be one way, and there could be other reasons why something might be wrong. And if push comes to shove, that if atheists think that a brother and a sister getting together is wrong, he has the exact same rationale that the theist has, which is that a brother and a sister getting together is wrong in and of itself. It can be further articulated and maybe even articulated in a harm sense. So you can make the argument that a brother, sister, grandmother. You can make the argument for a conservative argument for the preservation of families, for example. You could be a atheist conservative with a attenuated or watered down or moderated form of harm principle that recognizes that in terms of legal and moral regulation of behavior, we should not intervene, the state should not intervene, or people should not intervene and be busybodies and regulate the affairs of people if they don't cause any harm to others. And you can believe that, but simultaneously also believe, however, the preservation of families is a government interest. It's a societal interest that we need to preserve families because it's overall, on aggregate, good to maintain strong social and familial bonds, right? You can make the argument that homosexuality doesn't violate that, but brother-sister incest, mother-daughter incest, or grandmother-granddaughter incest does violate that because it harms at the very heart of preserving good families and good family relations, right? So I could make the argument, let's say, if a brother and sister comes along and they at the age of 27, or one is 28, one is 27, they realize they have feelings for each other. I can make the argument is that, look, you've been brother and sister for such a long time, right? This is a unique sort of relationship, a unique sort of biological relationship, right? We want to preserve these sort of familial relationships. Would you really want to destroy almost your brother and sister relationship by engaging in a intimate sexual act, right? Because ultimately this feeling that you have might subside, probably will subside, and you can engage in these sort of feelings with other people. Why do you need to do it with your brother and sister, right? This sort of argument, you can you can do for in any other situation as well. For example, two friends who have been friends forever, and then they decide after a long time, after being friends, that they're going to turn their relationship into a sexual one, right? Now, not every single moral wrong is a strong moral wrong. It could be something as simple as it could be something as simple as that there is a peripheral issue associated with it. Yeah. So if you're gonna, let's say if you're gonna start a business at the age of 80, well, there's nothing wrong with that, right? There's nothing wrong with starting well, actually, wait. What is the advice that you give to somebody if you're starting a business at the age of 80? Well, you're 80 now, right? You might want to be concerned about whether or not you can actually successfully operate a business. Or let's say you make a promise to somebody, and you want to not fulfill that promise because of for some reason. You've got some secondary reason why you can't fulfill that promise. Well, somebody might say, on the strictest sense, it's not wrong to sometimes violate promises, but that doesn't mean we think there's no moral considerations involved at all in breaking a promise, right? There might be, even if there is a secondary reason why you should break the promise, like you've got to go to work. Well, you made a promise, so we might scold them, condemn them, and say that he's engaged in a morally wrong action. Yeah, not everything has to have a strong sort of state interest where something is banned. Yeah, lying is another example. Lying to people is not regulated by the state, but that doesn't mean it's not morally wrong to lie to people. It's still it's being dishonest to somebody deprives them of the truth, it misleads them, and it can cause harm, and so on. And these are conversations that we're having all the time. And in the same sense, if a brother and sister all of a sudden decides to transform their relationship into a sexual one, is there some moral considerations that they need to take into account of? What is it? What moral what are the intuitions, quote unquote intuitions, that are being generated? And then we need to articulate and give color to those intuitions. Why are we having those intuitions? And it's because, biologically speaking, for the longest part, our brother and sister relationship has a different feeling to it. And to turn that on its head, isn't this kind of morally unproblematic act? There are some issues with it. Yeah, you've been a brother and sister for a very long time, and you're turning it into this other sort of relationship. And you might say that for any other relationship as well, like an employee-employer relationship, or a long-lasting friends who's had a platonic relationship for a very long time, and they want to now turn it into a sexual one.
Teacher-student relationships and all this.
Yeah, but those involve power dynamics. Those involve power. I'm talking about even outside. Those
have a dynamic. Pretty much,
outside of power dynamics. Even if there is no power dynamics. For example, if there's a brother and if there's two friends, and they've been together for a very long time as friends, and then all of a sudden they want to turn their relationship into a sexual one. Well, you may say there's nothing illegal. There's no reason for the state to intervene and regulate that sort of behavior and ban it. But that doesn't mean it's not morally questionable to some extent. It probably is. On the ground, in real life, in practice, we would say that. Yeah, somebody who's been friends for like 30 years, and all of a sudden now they want to turn it into a sexual relationship. One point of view could be, well, go for it. One point of view could be, there's nothing significantly wrong about it for the state to get involved. People do turn their relationships from one category, which is a friendship, into a very long friendship, into a loving, intimate, sexual one. But at the same time, what you would say, but think about it though. Think about it for a while. You have been friends for so long. You've just been friends, and that's a worthwhile preserving relationship to have. Yeah, do you want to now turn it into this sexual one where it can jeopardize your entire friendship? You would say that. Yeah, if Kylie and you have been have a friend for a very long time, and all of a sudden you're deciding to turn it into a sexual relationship, that would be a moral consideration to weigh before you turn it into that. Society should talk about it. And in the same sense, then, we can talk about brother-sister relationships, mother-daughter relationships, saying that these are unique sort of familial relationships that should not be easily just at the click of a finger think that we can just convert it into a sexual one. There is something wrong with it. I submit that this sort of answer that I'm giving is closer to and better than what Mohammed Hijab is trying to give, because he's just saying it's just wrong. But that's the intuition that he's trying to argue. Brothers and sisters shouldn't get together, right? Well, that's what I'm saying.
I agree, Madan. Agree.
And
Totally agree.
I'm giving a reason. At the very least, I have a reason. Like
Right.
You know, so that is the reason. Then I've given a reason. There you go. At least I have the reason.
That's definitely a much better reason. One more point I would add, and then Madan we should move on. Right? Is that I think Khali initially mentioned this point that it seems like any command that God makes could be arbitrary, a moral command. Basically, incest is wrong, could be, and this could be seen in effect, basically, within Islam or within the Abrahamic religions, that at certain point, incest was considered not bad, basically, because if you believe that Adam and Eve had children from within themselves, and the whole humankind, got reproduced from those two, then at certain point, incest was rampant pretty much within their communities. And then at certain point, then God decided that no, incest is bad. So yeah, it seems like it's random and arbitrary, pretty much, right?
And
Anyways, so we should.
Yeah, just one more thing. The legal acceptability of homosexuality does not necessarily translate into the social acceptability or the morally unproblematic nature of homosexuality. It just means that it's not sufficiently damaging to the world that the law needs to intervene and interrupt, and therefore it satisfies the standards of the harm principle, right? But that doesn't mean that there isn't anything at all wrong with any form of homosexuality, right? Let's say you do have a child that is a homosexual, and you might be okay with the idea that homosexuality is okay overall, but there are some issues in the sense that, would you just blindly necessarily just go click your finger and go, yeah, homosexuality is just a good thing? You're a homosexual, okay, fine. I don't think that's as a good parent. You are acting as a good parent by just clicking your finger and going, no, it's fine, right? I think you should think about it, because if you are homosexual, right, you might have issues in respect to conceiving children, right? So I would be like, are you sure you're homosexual? Are you sure? Because if you go down this route and you can't, for example, you're not attracted to the opposite gender, you're attracted to your same gender, then you've diminished the pool of potential candidates who you can mate with. It's now halved, and you can't even mate in a natural biological sense. You have to use artificial insemination, and these are things that are strictly not wrong in a deep sense, but they might be wrong in a peripheral sense, right? When I say wrong, I mean there might be there are problems involved. Yeah. Also, being homosexual in a society that doesn't accept it, that's going to be difficult. Yeah, it's the same sort of arguments for interracial marriage. It's not that we have to think that interracial marriage is wrong or just right. We can think it's generally right and generally not wrong, and therefore the law shouldn't intervene. It's generally morally unproblematic. But there are some issues. For example, if two ethnicities get together, if they're very, 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 very different, there might be some issues so if I have a daughter who wants to get married to this person from a completely different culture, and there are some stigma, or there is some racism, or there is some discrimination between the cultures, I will say, look, although I in principle don't think it's wrong for two different ethnicities to get together, keep in mind, beware before you marry this person from a different culture, that it's going to be difficult for you to integrate in that culture, because that culture hates you. So so this is a far more nuanced conversation that you can have. It's similar to smoking as well. Smoking, do I think is generally?
I agree, Madan. I think we should have this. Sorry, do you want to finish that point?
Yeah, very quickly. It's like smoking as well. Smoking is legally right. The harm principle, legally right. It's not legally banned. If you're going to damage your lungs, you go in ahead and damage your lungs. But is it completely risk-free? Of course not, right? You have that open conversation with somebody, although it's your legal right to smoke, right? You are diminishing your life. You are harming your lungs. You are gonna possibly get a disease if you could continue doing it, especially in chain smoking by the time you're 70. Yeah, so you can have this kind of nuanced conversation where you think something is overall not wrong, but has some issues, and you can do that with homosexuality as well. You can after checking through all the issues, you might come to the conclusion that for this person, homosexuality is going to be the only way he can live, and therefore is the best route for him, because he's not going to be able to have a partner. He's not going to be able to have a relationship unless he does it through the homosexual means. But if somebody's a bit more ambiguous, you'll give them those risks, just like you give the risk of smoking. The risks of being a homosexual is A, B, C, D, E. Yeah, you're not going to be. You might need to go through artificial insemination. You might need to adopt. Do you want to live that life? Yeah, just the way you would talk about smoking. In the same sense, then we can talk about incest. We might think overall there might not be any strict harms through the harm principle prism of thinking. However, there are some issues there. Like do you really want to change your relationship with your mother, with your sister? There are some ickiness about that. You've been so solidified in this relationship for such a long time. Yeah. Last time I checked, unlike homosexuality, there isn't any orientation towards incest. These feelings could fade away. Do you really want to risk all that? Yeah. It's not as though the atheist cannot have those conversations. And guess what? The theist would be having very similar conversations, and therefore you can meet in the middle. So, well, yeah, I'll stop there.
All right,
Yeah.
Madin. Kylie, you want to add something, or shall we move on to the next?
No, I think we can move on.
Next video. All right.
Yeah.